Who's starting this time?
Caesar hasn't done one yet.
That's,
What's up, New Wave? New Wavers.
yeah.
This is New Wave After Dark podcast. Welcome again. Today we'll be talking about dosing.
Dosing in the
Elements.
major elements, minor
Yeah.
elements, how to test for them, what to use, all the fun stuff.
When do you start dosing? What do you dose? Major element, all that kind of.
Could we call it just dosing 101?
Sure.
Yeah, that's a good
Run with it on that
good
one.
start.
Yeah.
Because it kind of gives you a little intro, a little why, who, what, where, when, why. All those fun ones, right?
I think we should start by taking the scary out of dosing.
Yes.
Because I know when I first started, when I got my first stick, then I was like, okay, now what do I do? And the reason why a lot of people don't get sticks, and because they're like, I don't want to dose, but they don't really realize it's not just acros. The hard skeletons of your LPS are also included, so they also are combined of that calcium, that carbonate that
Right.
needs for dosing for growth.
Well, if they get like really heavy into LPS, they're
Yeah.
gonna have to dose anyway.
Anything with
Anyway.
a hard skeletal
So
structure.
dosing doesn't have to be scary. It's not like this magic science lab. And we're going to take the scary out of it and just start with the basics.
Basics. You better be testing. Pretty much the basic of it. And that's really one of the only true ways that you will find out if you do need to dose or if you don't need to dose. Yes, some people will say you can physically look at the coral and see that it's lacking something or the other, but the best way to do it is test, find out your numbers. Then you can kind of truly dive into what is needed and what isn't needed.
Yeah.
I think alkalinity is probably going to be the only one that will actually show in the corals where you can actually physically see it. If calcium is low or magnesium is low, for the most part, you're not going to be able like, oh, that coral looks really light today or anything like that.
Also, people don't consider the fact that coralline
Yes.
algae does consume those elements, and even if
absolutely.
you,
And same with refugiums.
Yep.
Yep.
They also consume as well. So, and some of those elements, well, the calcium for sure for coralline algae, because it is a calcareous algae.
yeah, there's some tanks, for example, that we take care of that are just softies, but we still dosing a very minimal amount of it because the coralline algae is consuming that. So I mean, they gotta have that into consideration too.
Yeah, that's a good point. And just to clarify, that the three major ones we're talking about here, if any of you listeners or people watching don't know, A, calcium, B, alkalinity. I meant to say alkalinity first, but we'll go with that route. So
Number three.
alkalinity, calcium, two major ones, and then third, magnesium. There are trace elements too, which we might dive into a little bit, but
Yeah, trace elements. I think a lot of people get confused and they're like, okay, this is all a bunch of, like, there's too much going on here, too much science, so I'm just going to forget it. But basics, yeah, it's alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, top three major elements. The minor elements are a lot harder to test for in any sort of aquarium-based test kit. You'd need more of a lab-based or do an ICP test if you're looking specifically into those. We can talk more of how to dose trace elements, though, without overdosing. We'll dive into that a little bit
Yeah.
later, but I think sticking with the top three and going from there.
there is a right way and a wrong way to dose trace. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Sure, and I think for dosing, that becomes the twofold. You can do it as simply as dosing every day manually, or you can automate, which I think is the fastest and easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
It's most consistent as well. So I mean, we're all humans. We all forget. We all get busy. So it's like, oh crap, I forgot to dose today and tomorrow, and now I don't remember when. You never want to be like, oh, okay, well, I'll just make up for the week and dose a whole bunch. That's not how it works either.
And there's affordable dosing heads that
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's affordable options for solution too, dosing solution and going the whole way. I mean, everybody makes their own pretty much soda ash and calcium carbonate nowadays. So it works out pretty well.
Yeah, the Reef Endurance line we just brought on, obviously BRS has the bulk pharma stuff, but, all pharma grade, so great options for dosing.
Those
and-
Red Sea has an option for,
Yep.
I mean, Tropic
Marin
Marin has an option for the Alpha Reef, which is, I mean, so there's a whole bunch of, I think we just start basically with alkalinity and then we can go down
Yeah.
the line.
Definitely the most important one for sure. So
alkalinity, stability.
Yeah.
especially in those SPS tanks.
I think the most common thing people dose for alkalinity, and you guys can kind of share what you're doing with your systems, but is soda ash. So taking that dry soda ash, typically pharma grade, and mixing it. If you're using a product like the Red Sea, it's going to be a little bit more concentrated in a liquid form. You just buy it in a bottle, hook it up to your doser, manually dose it from there. But I would say the most common that most reefers are using is that kind of 2-part method with the dry soda ash, mixing in a jug and then putting in their dosing containers and going from there.
Well,
Go ahead.
no, good.
And I think so. Why soda ash? Because it sounds like this weird, like baking powder. It
I was
sounds
going to
like
say,
a
are
baking.
we making cookies out of the tank or something
No.
like that?
So soda ash is essentially breaking it all down. Is sodium and carbonate, and so corals need that carbonate, and they also need a calcium molecule to create that structure. So what you're doing is you're adding that back into the water as it is consumed. So that's the basics. So basically you're like, my corals are growing just like, your kids are growing, give them a little milk. It's not the actual milk that they need the calcium, they need all the other things. So you're providing that structural support for your corals to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the soda ash also helps with pH.
Yeah.
I don't, to be honest, I don't think it's that much help, but anything is good. People have a lot of problems with keeping their pH where they want it.
And that reminds me too, we didn't even mention kelp washer,
Yep.
which would be
Nope.
a combination of both, which
Yep.
we can get into, more once we talk about calcium. But
And that's
Oh,
also
yeah.
kind of more of a specific system too. You can't just throw calc flosser on any system simply because you kind of have to have its own separate dosing utility.
or you use it as kind of a baseline in the background, consistently dosing, and then you fine tune it with your 2-part, your separate elements of soda and.
Does
soda
everybody
ash and
here
calcium.
dose 2-part?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do.
I'm on 2-part. Yep.
I think I might be the only one. I'm all for reef on
Okay.
my system.
And I
switched
for
it,
me,
actually.
Alpha Reef, the benefit of Alpha Reef, because it has your calcium, magnesium, and all of your trace elements all in one. The cons on that though is if your alkalinity and calcium aren't being absorbed at the same consistency,
Rate.
a frequency rate, you're dosing the exact same amounts of each. So if your calcium's low and your alkalinity is high, you can't necessarily increase that. But they have other products, AlkaBalance and calcium. I don't remember.
I think it's calcium CP or something like that.
I'm not sure what their other additive is, but there's other ways to increase them, like a one-time adjustment, and you can do it that way as well. So, but Alpha Reef is great. I know one of people talk about, like, it is kind of expensive to do it that way, so there's other ways of doing it, but for nano tanks
It's so
or
much
smaller
easier.
systems, it's so much easier, and you get all of it all in one.
Yep.
Right.
And in nano life, space is limited, so it's very nice that you only need one dosing head to put in there and kind of bada bing, bada boom, solve it from there.
Do you use the dry or do you use the liquid?
So this will be my 3rd week, and I've just used the dry.
Okay.
Dry, make it into liquid, go from there. I'm just a little bit cheaper that way, and I found that I kind of like the control of doing it that way as well.
Yeah.
It is a good option too. It allows you to make gallons of it versus. We can even come up. We can send a link or whatnot to how much it actually costs if you make it yourself versus buying it in the liquid form. Because you can do the same thing. You can buy like a Red Sea or balling solution too, pre-mixed. Yes, it's easier for some people. They just want to, they don't want to mess with any of the adding, RO and mixing and measuring. So that's an option too. But if you're trying to save money, that's a great way to do it. And you have all of them, so you don't have to have this closet filled with different types, different additives and extra powders and all that fun stuff.
The one thing that I will say is nice about that liquid Alpha Reef is the bottles they use. If you've ever seen them, they're the bottles that have that kind of squeeze tube that
Yep.
goes up into a measuring device. I think it goes up to like 15 or 20 mils.
Yep.
So, what you could do if you wanted to save money but still kind of have the benefit of that bottle, it's going to be less precise than a syringe or,
Yeah.
a dosing vial of some sort. But you could just buy that one time and then,
Reuse
mix
it.
it after the fact.
Yeah, if you're
you know.
manually dosing,
Yeah.
that would work. Otherwise, you for those options too, you literally just drill a hole in the top. You can use some rigid tubing and hook it right to your doser and set
Yeah.
and forget it as well. So you can kind of graduate into that if you're just still kind of afraid of
Dosing.
dosers. I remember
Yep.
my first when people are like, you have to test. I'm like, oh, I don't want to. I'm just gonna have star polyp.
Green star polyp.
Yeah, green star polyp for days. You know what I mean? And then you get bored with it, and then you're like, oh, I want to try something else. Well, you just have to understand the basics. It's really not that scary.
Absolutely.
Once you do it once, it's kind of like you've set up your first apex, and then you're like, oh god, that was.
This is what I was afraid
Yeah,
of this whole time.
Yeah.
It's like a calcium reactor. People don't
Yep.
use it because they see it and it's like, oh my god,
It's fearful.
It's really
That's me.
not.
Yep.
It's really easy.
It's a creepy
So-
machine over there. What does that do?
And so, I mean, again, that's another way of getting that calcium, that carbonate back into your water as well. So there's a whole bunch of different ways. You know, there's all-in-ones, there's two-part, there's calcium reactors, there's calc washer. So which one for which system, I guess, is dependent is...
I think it becomes an issue of aquarium size.
Yeah,
I think that's a
agreed.
big one, too.
Because calcium reactors are generally speaking for larger systems where, I mean, once you get it dialed in, you can see, I mean, I've seen some macros with calcium reactors versus two-part, and they are super dense. So I think there's a lot of benefit to the calcium reactor, especially in larger tanks.
One thing about that is also that calcium reactors, once it's dialed in, like you said, it's really easy to keep the same stable for a long time.
Yep.
I mean, it's not gonna lie. If you do the two-part, it's also easy, but you do have to be more in point with it to make sure that it's there where you want it. Otherwise, any variation, it will, have a spike, either up or down.
So now we're talking about big systems and things like that. I got to know, Caesar, how much are you dosing in your tank at home?
That's fair. 'Cause I know at the store, some of our systems were dosing 300-400 mils a day.
Yeah.
Well, calcium is, I think, 450.
450 mils
Yeah.
A day?
a day.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's on how many? What's your water volume? I know it's a 300
So
tank.
it's a 280 gallon tank, but you have the sump, which is a 125. And all this is not full, obviously. There's a 30 gallon refugium and there is a 80 gallon frac tank attached to it. So I think
500 gallons.
somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And then alkalinity is probably about the same.
So
in the
I mean,
same
you
area.
can see where you get
Yeah.
you get the cute dosing containers, and like you would go through that in half a day.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I have a 2.5 gallons now each
Right.
because otherwise I'll be doing it every
6
other
hours,
day,
it would
maybe.
seem
I don't
like.
know.
Yeah.
Jeepers, dosing 400 gallon, or what is it, 400 milliliters? That's,
Yeah.
you'd be going through that.
Like those Red Sea 1,000
Yep.
gallons,
Oh,
like
that'd
every
be-
2 days. I mean, can you imagine? Then you see where the cost comes in because you kind of have to premix it if you're
Yep.
going to do it that way. Because
Oh, yeah.
I mean, those are like $35, $36 or $40, whatever they are. I mean, you'd be dosing $10 or $15 a day.
And a lot
over
of
each.
people argue
Each.
about like, well, you should have a calcium reactor. Maybe, but like I said before, if it's working and
Yeah, if it's
Why-
not broke, don't
Yep.
fix it.
Yeah.
Bingo.
And if you're comfortable with it, I think we all need to get more versed into calcium reactors. I know in the big tank upstairs that we're going to be doing the 600 gallon, we will be doing a calcium reactor because it'll be linked down here to all the filtration, which I'm really excited for us to get that going because we can show the start to finish on that project.
I want to
So-
install the calcium reactor.
Yeah, that's fine. And then you
I
can
love
dial
those
it
things.
in, and then I can be mad at you if something happens.
Yeah. There you go.
Bingo.
Well, I mean,
Skip.
There's
Scapegoat.
not anything that's going to happen. I mean, we already have it ordered. We already have it actually here. Same with the tank that's been sitting in the garage for 3 years.
We should do a podcast on why we chose that tank, why you chose that sump, why you chose the protein skimmer, and kind
Yeah.
of give a reason to the rhyme, more or less, why we went this route instead of going this route. Because
you guys have
there's
the
everything you could ever want. And
you already have the protein skim. I mean the calcium reactor, right?
I do. Yep.
We can show that because that's a sweet one.
Yep.
I like
It's
it.
the dust taco. With the really
wait, we're getting tacos?
yes, 2 of them. Those tacos.
It is
Actually,
Tuesday.
when I first started looking into them, I'm like, that's really interesting. Like I didn't know where the names came from. I still don't really, but Das Taco is the name of the reactor that we're using, and we were very specific in that reactor as well as the media that we're using. I know I mentioned it yesterday, but BRS did a big study or a test on different medias and having the the byproducts of the phosphate and stuff in there. So I want to be more versed in that because again, I need to take the scary out of it. I can't tell everybody else to take the scary out of dosing when
We can do a
you know,
podcast on that.
on
I think
calcium
we should.
reactors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Break it down to why, who,
Especially-
what, where, when, why.
Yeah, especially the media, because I think the media for that that specific one is not your regular.
No, it's not, and I have it in the closet somewhere.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like pure calcium and alkalinity.
Yeah.
Oh, the good stuff.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
Yeah, so that, but I mean, so calcium reactor, I would definitely do for the big tank for the simple fact of what Caesar's talking about. I mean, it would be a 600 plus. We have the Royal Exclusive Dream Box, which is going to be a couple 100 gallons. I mean, it's going to probably be at about 1,000 gallons. I don't want to be dosing a gallon of alkalinity every day. And then it becomes like, then you start talking about like, when do you dose? Because I know that when Lou came from Tropic Marin, he talked about, and a lot of people say, okay, you're supposed to dose alkalinity. You know, are you supposed to dose that? I believe there's one where you dose in the night, one that you dose in the evening. You alternate them, not at the same time. So that, I mean, I'd rather just be stable.
Right.
I don't really want to hit on why you wouldn't want to dose them at the same time is because they will bond together and just make more salt in the aquarium where it won't actually do what it's meant to
Well,
do.
actually,
That's
it turns
why.
into aragonite.
Oh,
So it turns into a solid.
yep, where it won't be utilized.
Correct. It can't be absorbed.
Yep.
Well, we have to make the distinction that happens only if you have your lines too close together.
Yes.
Yes.
If you're
Yes.
dosing at the same time, but your lines are separate,
That's true.
There's
Yep.
no reason for them to.
Good point.
Yeah, and if you're dosing again, like what you said at the same time, some dosers you can stagger, the time where it doses, which helps a little bit, because then you have it cycling through the aquarium, but you still have that chance of it precipitating.
Yeah.
And magnesium does play a major factor in that, which once we talk about magnesium, we'll definitely mention. But if you have lower levels of magnesium, you're going to get more precipitate. So if you see that white buildup in your sump where you're dosing, or your rear chamber, check your magnesium levels.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, check
then
your
you're like-
magnesium levels and see what
Yeah.
they're at, because they could very well be low. So I know a lot of us don't test magnesium as much as we should, so that can be a really good visual indicator on where your magnesium levels are at.
Another indicator is people come in and say, "Well, I'm dosing calcium and it just won't go up." Like it's at 350 and I'm dosing and it won't go up. Well, check your magnesium.
Yeah.
That's a good call.
Well, and people come in too, and they're like, "My tank's new. I don't need to dose because I do water changes, and that's enough." And generally speaking, for a set amount of time, that will work. But over time, if you intend your corals to grow coralline algae, all the other things that you want to, grow and prosper, you will need to dose. Water changes will never, ever, ever be enough to replace that.
Yeah, and to be clear, it's not one of those things where it's like you add all your corals and then you set the dose at, let's say, 50 mils for calcium and alkalinity, and you're good. You don't have to check it for like another 6 months. It's an ever-changing system. As corals grow, get bigger, they're consuming more and more. So again, it comes down to what Ted said. Make sure you're testing frequently. And you're doing it correctly, so you know what your levels are at. You're going to need to adjust your dosing throughout, your time period as a reefer. So,
and testing now has become super easy. They do have the Hanna alkalinity testers, which are great. Hanna has their calcium. I know the big knock on that is an extra step, but I mean it's very accurate. There's other Red Sea, Salford, Aquaforest does another really good for calcium, and then magnesium too. We haven't had it in our hands yet, but I'm excited to get that from Hanna to see what the magnesium test kit looks like. Because again, the easier it is to test, the
more
more
you'll
likely
do it.
you'll do it.
Right.
And then also the Trident.
Don't forget the automations.
Yeah,
Yep.
automation and the Trident, and just taking out the ability that it can talk to your dose. Just having that constant. I mean, even if some of the values aren't calibrated, it drops off of calibration. You can check and see. You can see trends on it too. So I know some of the knocks on that is, that some of it comes out of calibration, but you can see the trends. So you would be able to see your alkalinity is really stable, or if there's a drop, or magnesium, there's a drop. There's calcium, same thing.
The graphs are huge on that.
They
Trident.
are, and
Incredibly huge.
Go ahead.
no, and it's really easy to see.
There's ways
Yeah.
to fix that too.
Yep.
I mean, if you think your Trident is not accurate, there's ways to fix it. I mean, obviously we'll dive into it later on a different, but it can be as accurate as your HANA checker.
Yeah,
At least that's what I
absolutely.
found.
I
That's what I
agree.
found.
No,
I would agree.
I mean, there's a reason they called it the unicorn. I mean, we thought it was never possible, it wouldn't exist. I mean, because I've been doing this and you too have been doing this for decades. We thought that something that we would never,
an age
ever,
on you.
ever see.
I know.
And
creepy
when
on
it
that.
finally came out, I mean, yes, everything has its little. I mean, whenever you're dealing with any equipment in saltwater, I mean, let's be
gonna
honest.
have hiccups.
You're gonna. I mean, saltwater is hard on everything.
Isn't it something like the most corrosive substance is salt water or something along those
Probably.
lines, just because of the salt?
Yeah, and so I mean, there's like Caesar said, we've learned a lot of. That's another thing about being grandparents in the industry. We've learned a lot of secrets. This is Grandpa Senor.
What you're talking
Papa
about?
Senor.
Yeah, Papa.
Jeez.
No, I hope I'm not a grandparent anytime soon.
That's fair.
It was just-
I don't blame
If
you there.
anyone's gonna be, it's gonna be me the soonest because I have the oldest
Yeah.
child.
Oh,
So.
Good luck with that.
Wah, wah.
back to life.
Oh,
Back to reality.
No, back to magnesium is what we're going back to. So magnesium, very important as well. A lot of people, I would say for like a lower stocked tank, newer tanks, magnesium generally is something that stays a lot more stable and doesn't necessarily need to be
Dosed.
dosed, especially in that first year.
I would agree.
Would you guys
Yeah.
agree with that?
Yep.
Especially if you're doing routine water changes,
Yep.
you'll get
It'll
that
get
typically in your
replenished.
salt mix.
Yep.
Obviously every salt mix is a little different as far as what it mixes at, but you should get most of that. Which brings me to a question: do you guys currently dose any magnesium? I know you have all for Reef Ted, so
Technically, it's in
You
there.
do, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, but I don't
I do.
dose it anywhere
I
else.
don't.
I
Do
do.
you-
And
do-
actually, I can go through my little system because we have that, of course, when we have the Royal Exclusive dosing
Oh,
things
yeah.
that light up and flash and all the other fun things. But yeah, we dose.
you use the bulk pharma for your dosing
I
on
do.
mag.
Yep,
Okay.
we use the BRS
I-
magnesium for that.
It depends on the system, I think. I've never dosed magnesium.
I would agree
I-
with
if-
Caesar on that. I think it really depends on the system.
Yeah,
I mean, I do my water change every week.
So do I.
But I mean, I never had to.
But you have a Trident on yours, right?
Yep.
So you're monitoring it anyway.
Yep.
So that's another thing. I never, to be honest with you, until I got the Trident, I wasn't dosing magnesium, and I didn't really realize how important that was and how low it was. So now that it's a lot more stable.
Do you see a lot better growth with your magnesium levels stabilized at all?
I think everyone will.
I think it-
mean, just having whatever's that 1300, 1350 to 1450, keeping those levels stable like natural seawater. That's ideal. What you'd want anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Plus, like Brendan said, it does play a vital role in the calcium uptake and maintaining balance overall.
it's basically your moderator of the two other major elements.
Yep.
So
Just keeps them from bonding.
Yeah.
Yep, it is the three major. And then, I mean, you get into all of the other trace elements. Now, I mean, you don't just, my corals aren't looking the best, or I'm going to take them to the next level and I'm going to throw a bunch of trace elements in, and that is not the answer at all. You will, I mean, if you
Do
look
worse.
at how much iodine's the number one
Yep.
overdosed trace element, and people don't understand that it's like, and I'll look at see what actual percentage it is makes up of seawater, but it's like a point zero zero something.
it's 001 or something
Right,
like
and
that.
and it's really hard to test for and over, in the standard aquarium industry test kits. So to be very, very careful, and even if you read then it's like what kind of iodide, you read those and it says be very careful when you're dosing
Yeah.
those, because you can it's detrimental to your tank.
I think we can
Absolutely.
express it with this. If you're going to dose trace elements, send in an ICP test.
Yes.
You
Just
better-
do
I
it
think-
once or twice a year. And
I would
you'll
even do
know.
it more frequently
Yep.
than that if you're dosing it just kind of willy-nilly throwing trace elements in there. I think you should be one of those guys that's doing your ICPs monthly,
Yeah.
just to make sure that
Yeah.
you're trending in the correct way. You're not doing something where you're throwing, oh, my tank doesn't need any iodine. Okay, well, I'm doing this every other week. Boom, let's throw some
Well,
iodine
and there's
in it.
good hybrid methods. I know where Chop Marin makes it, and then BRS combines the
The A and the
hybrid,
K.
Yep.
the A plus and the, or is it A? It's
A and K.
The A and K,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
and then one is 12 and one is 13.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you can actually mix that with your 2-part. That's
Yep.
actually the method I use. I'll mix it in with my 2-part, very low doses of it just to make sure we're
And
not.
they do a good job basically of I mean, and it's just an overview. It's a suggested, okay, if your tank is this old or this full of corals, these are the parameters. And like Ted was saying, start at the bare minimum and then work your way up.
You can always go half, and
Exactly.
then
Yep.
you can work your way up. You just don't want to
And
load
then
it
with
right
those
away.
two, you see ill effects, just stop it and then start again slowly.
I think it becomes also a part of your water change routine.
Yep.
I seen this happen more in tanks that they only do a water change every 3 or a month, every month, water change, where the trace elements get depleted. To be honest, I send out like 2-3 ICP tests on my tank, and the only things that I saw low was iodine, and I think potassium. And they weren't gone, but they were low.
And those, unfortunately, there are test kits for those,
Those
two.
two.
Right.
So if you are going to dose them individually, I would highly suggest testing first. Obviously, you don't just dump a bunch of stuff in there.
Yeah, I know Red Sea makes them. Do you guys know
Salford
any?
does.
Okay, yeah,
Salford does.
Salford.
Yep.
I thought I heard Aquaforce was also doing a full line of water chemistry too. So I think on the market
So
it
yeah,
will be.
but I mean, again, like Caesar was saying too, if you don't want to have 19 test kits and a whole room devoted to
Yeah.
testing, send it in. Have someone else. They're using lab grade equipment as well, and then you can go from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's as simple as filling a tube with water, putting a label on it,
Yep.
and then
In that
sending
way.
it.
Yeah,
Yep.
and
And
then
waiting a
also
week.
too, I mean, what people don't realize is like your a big contributing factor to a depletion of trace elements is your refugium, and so you absolutely, if you even go to like the Clearwater turf scrubbers or other, you go to their sites and you read about it, they talk about trace element depletion and the importance of re-adding trace elements to your system. So there's several different ways. I know that KZ makes a really good 1, 2, 3, 4 for trace elements.
Yep.
And there's a whole bunch of different other options too that you can easily put on dosers if you wanted to in small amounts because they have it already pre-mixed.
Yeah.
But yeah, it starts slow. With
Yeah.
anything, just slow, because you can over that stuff.
Slow and
overdo
steady
it.
wins the race. Because again, I'm
Absolutely.
going to go with nothing fast, nothing good in a reef aquarium happens fast. And actually nothing happens fast in a reef aquarium except for death.
Yep.
So, I mean, just slow and steady.
I like to say Rome wasn't built in one day. You're not going to have an awesome fish tank built one day either.
Well, you
Right?
can
Nope.
if it's freshwater.
That's the worst.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know about that.
I
have
mean,
a
if
cool
it's a
planted
planted tank,
tank,
let's say it takes a little bit. But if it's just like your regular, yeah,
That's
you
true.
can make a masterpiece. And
Oh, yeah.
Throw a few fake plants in there,
Yeah,
a few
those
fake.
octopus,
Yeah.
those octopus in the cave things. When people come in all the time, I'm like, how
Yeah.
much is that octopus? I'm like, oh no.
Oh, I
Hasn't
had
moved in
a
3
guy
years.
ask me, "Is that a real octopus?"
Oh,
Yep.
You had a guy. We
Yeah,
have
and-
one every single.
and that
probably
one,
every
and
single
that
day.
one, and that one. And they like to sit the exact same
the
way.
exact same way.
And
they
the
don't.
exact same color too.
They're posing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they don't.
They're just
move.
waiting for a photo op.
Yeah.
I'm just. How long was he sitting there looking at it before?
No, it happens every day.
Yeah, it's unfortunately
yeah,
true.
they're like, so what do you feed your octopus? I'm like, we don't have one. He's like, yeah, it's right.
Or they ask, "How do you keep it in there?"
Oh man.
And you're like, "What?" And you're like, "Yeah, that octopus doesn't he go out?" And you're like, "Oh God,
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then then
here's your sign."
You're in the wrong store, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. We used to do when I worked at a pet store back when I was a teenager. We used to we had this wall or this big window where you could see the dogs, they sold puppies at that time, where you could see all the puppies. So we would clean the glass as clear as we could. And if a kid bonked his head, we got 1 point. If adults bonked their head, we got 2. Because I mean, people just don't pay attention, so they're like, I've seen people too where they're looking at like our shrimp or something and they smash their head on the tank. I'm like, yes, I cleaned all the salt creep off of that one. There's a big forehead print on there.
Go up to Hunter. Nice job cleaning the glass.
Yeah, well done. 2 points.
3 points. Let's be honest.
So the other thing too, since we're talking about the store and is making sure to check to make sure your dosing containers don't run out, and if
Yep.
they do run out, don't make up for the 5 days that it missed. That's
Yep.
never
No.
a good thing either. So, I mean, checking those, it's as simple as you can set a reminder, or if you know that you're dosing, 5, 10, 450 mils, your container
Well,
be big enough. Yeah.
The Apex has reminders.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Or
Yep.
you get the DDR, it'll give you that low level.
Oh, it'll tell
reminder.
you when
Yep.
it's low. Yeah.
I try to just do it on my weekly water change. Then you just
Yeah,
take a
just
look at it,
be
make
done
sure,
with
see
it.
what's what, and then you're
Be
on
done
your
with
day.
it, yeah.
Yep.
Keep it in a place where you can see it, obviously, so you can check it. If
Absolutely.
you're changing filter socks, you can easily see all your containers. or-
I think another important point, and we kind of touched on it between when you mix the calcium and alkalinity, how it does create a solid, it does create aragonite.
Precipitates. Yeah.
Do not try to mix all
Oh,
of them
yeah.
in one jug. There
It
you
will-
can't. I mean, there
no.
are recipes obviously for Alpha Reef, and it does not include soda ash and soda and the calcium chloride in one. I mean, not only is it will it turn into a solid, it gets really hot. Just don't do
Really
it.
quick.
Yeah. And if you ever have, because I know, Caesar and I have had this issue where like someone's at a maintenance client's house and
Which
it's
one
not
is
labeled
which?
which one's which.
Dump
Yeah.
it.
If you're using soda ash, put a little bit into salt
Okay.
water. It'll be cloudy if it's soda ash. If
Yeah.
it's clear, it's calcium.
Yep.
Oh, that's a good trick.
Yeah, it is because you can see as
Absolutely.
it drops in too, and then also too if you are manually or if you're automatically dosing and you notice, I think this is one thing that we've noticed through all of our dosing. Our dosers in general is, you're like, okay, I keep increasing my dosing of alkalinity, but my alk's not going up. Make sure you check the connections. I think that's a
Yep.
big
Big
deal
one.
because I've had several of them. Like we've altered some of the doses and stuff to make. We've used the John Guy's fittings, which we can go through all of our little tips and tricks. Me and Grandpa. And
Thanks.
yeah, right. Me and Papa.
Papa Senior.
But making sure that you're not either dosing your carpet with alkalinity, which has happened
That's
as well,
horrible.
or B, it's actually you have air bubbles in your doser and you're actually not dosing at all. 'Cause
What? Yeah. It's
then you have
simple.
to make sure.
Accumulate. Yeah.
It's
So
simple
check
like having the
check
leak.
that first.
Yeah. Proper fittings and connections.
Yeah,
is very
just make
important.
sure you check that first so you're not increasing. And then also, if you do see that there's a problem with those, then make sure you test a little more frequently to make sure you're not like overdosing then, because obviously you've kept increasing,
Yeah.
and then you don't want it to be a huge spike.
Right.
And there's
One
a
day
there's
wake
a
up.
trick with those John Guy's fittings
Yep.
where if you don't do it, the line will suck air. It
Yep.
won't leak, but you won't be dosing anything.
Because don't you have to put it in first and then?
Yeah, so people put it on the dose first, and then they push the line in. You push the line in first, and then you twist it on the doser. Otherwise, it will be loose.
Yep. And it works. It works very well because we've
Fun
had
fact
several
of the day.
clients.
I said fun fact of the day.
Yeah,
I didn't
we've
know
had
that.
several clients where it ends up like the return will end up dosing the carpet.
Yep.
And I know that for you guys, my carpet doesn't need any more alkalinity.
Yeah.
It
No.
doesn't really
Well,
grow.
and soda ash is especially terrible because once that stuff dries, it leaves that white, crusty,
Yeah.
like powdery, flour-looking stuff, and
Yep.
it's especially on your dosers, it can wreak havoc. Can attest to that. So, clean
Then
that
you
up
have your
right away.
dog licking it.
And I think also too, I think we should mention when you do test alk and calcium, especially if you're using a titration based test kit, the syringes you cannot use one
Mix 'em.
with the alkalinity solution and then go right to the calcium. I've seen that too, where you will if there's any crossover, make sure you're using separate syringes.
Yeah,
and
that's why
separate vials.
They give you
don't
different
they
colored
have
tips.
color coded?
Yeah, in
Yep.
Red Sea, they have the color coding tips. That's not just for fun. They didn't just decide that they're going to give you 3 different colors. It's right on the. It
Yep.
shows in the little diagram. It shows the color of the tip, what you want to, and then make sure those stay with each one because you'll get. Consistently, if you use the alkalinity and then you try to do the calcium, you'll get a super low reading, and then you're like, "Oh, okay, well, whatever."
Dumps them in.
And that's the other thing too. Test kits, they are very accurate, but if you're getting like just an outlier reading, for example, we had everything seemed stable, and then we had one outlier reading. Generally speaking, when you're at the end of your reagent bottle, or if they are expired, throw them away because they're not accurate at that point at all. So, I mean, you get an outlier. Make sure if you do get an outlier, I always test it a second time just to make sure, so you're not making adjustments based on
Right.
could potentially be a testing error or our error.
And check
For-
your dates for sure.
yes.
For people that feel like they're wasting reagent, go buy a new one and then compare the two.
Yep.
And then you'll
That's a
see
good
what
idea.
we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yep.
Then you'll
That
know
is a
for
good
sure
one.
that it's bad. And it's true. You get a bad reading and then you're like, but there's a lot left in there. Well,
I
yeah,
don't want
that's on
to-
you for not testing
Yeah, and it's $9
when you're supposed to. Yeah.
and then you kill your tank, and it's a lot more than $9. And I mean, not everyone can afford the $650 Trident.
Yep.
So I mean, it's
There's
just making
options.
sure. Yeah, there are other options, and just making sure. The one thing though with the Trident is you can see trends. So if you do test just to check, your calibration, and you see there's a huge deviation, obviously test
Yeah.
both of them.
And I guess I'll add into that, being the only one here that doesn't have a Trident, there's still ways of you to monitor. I know.
Jeez.
Don't
touch
knock me
anymore.
for that. But there are ways to get that kind of same experience. So
Yeah.
I actually have a mobile app on my phone that tracks all of my parameters. So as soon as I manually test, I have my phone up,
Yep,
I
and
enter
enter
that
it in.
in,
Yep.
and then I can kind of see the trends. I can see where's alkalinity, calcium, magnesium going, and then it just kind of tells me visually kind of
I
what's
think
going
that's
on.
important because then, because you can't always remember. I don't remember what I did yesterday.
Exactly,
I don't
yep.
remember what my tank test is.
Oh, I think my alkalinity was like 9.2.
yeah, and now
but
it shows 5. Everything must be growing. And again, we talked about this yesterday. You should test at the same time after you do the same amount or the same type of task. So if you're changing your GFO or ROAFOS and then you test alkalinity right away, again, you're going to get a lot lower readings. It doesn't mean that 2 hours later your corals just really grew really fast. That's not how it works. But testing at the same type of time of day, because you obviously don't want to be testing if you are automatically dosing. You don't want to test right after your dose, so that way everything is a lot more consistent. So that is key too. So having that visual and just having a schedule, like I do water changes on Sundays.
Yeah.
So then I test, my nitrate phosphates, and then I'll calibrate every once in a while on the calcium magnesium, but I do it every Sunday evening, so everything is pretty consistent.
Yeah, the majority of the time when you get a false reading, you get a wrong reading or something, honestly, I think 80% of the time is user error.
Yep.
No, I'd say 99.
I would say 99.9.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I was being nice, but
especially with the color coded ones. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, the
the
titration ones. Yep.
Titration, yeah.
And then I always do like when you're using those titration, I always do the discard drop, the first drop. I just do one drop on like a towel or something, so you don't, because those drops are important. So
it's
you get-
consistent.
Yeah, so you want each one to be, so you don't get that air bubble.
Mm-hmm.
You get that air bubble in, don't even follow through with the test.
Do it
Discard
over.
it, start it over, because it won't be accurate.
And-
Or when
anyway.
you're like, did I put 3 drops? Or because you're in there and then you get distracted.
Yep.
It's like if you're not sure, discard it because
Especially if you're doing like the Red Sea magnesium test.
yeah.
Yeah, because it's one
One
drop,
drop,
and then
wait
shake
2
like
seconds.
15
Yep.
seconds, and then another drop. Like,
I'm always holding up my finger like, okay, I'm on drop 1, and then 15 seconds later, okay,
Yeah.
I'm on
Like
drop
this.
2.
yeah, and it's so also too, and I've done a couple videos for Hannah, but when they say shake for 2 minutes or mix for 2 minutes,
They mean it.
They don't mean mix for 1 minute or what you feel like is 2 minutes, or set a timer. It's so easy.
Yeah.
I mean, I just set it, and then I just walk around. And then also note too that you need to, exactly, just shake them up, and then there's a reason for it. It's
Yep.
not just a suggestion.
Right.
So testing based on the instructions.
Or do what we do at the store for the magnesium and calcium for Red Sea. We have that little magnetic stirrer.
Yep. Just
Then you just let it
those are
go.
great. So
Those
we
are
should
easy.
actually maybe in the next couple podcasts bring in some products that make life easier.
Our
Yeah, that's a
favorite
good one.
products that might not be known. So
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I know we have those stirrers. I've never actually used one.
They're
but
sweet.
I mean,
They're
our
nice,
clients
yeah.
love them. Customers love them.
they're sweet.
And
Just
they're-
because you just
and they're cheap.
just don't lose your pill. little
Caesar.
magnetic pill in there. They're
I know.
small and they
What?
can easily be lost. So
I found it. Okay, I found it.
Did
It's
you,
on
did
there.
you
now.
swallow it, Caesar?
Yeah.
That's not cool.
thought it was a
I thought it was
TikTok.
a TikTok.
Did you say TikTok?
TikTok. Yeah.
No, so I think bringing in your favorite products
Yeah,
to
we
make
can
life
definitely do that.
easier. I know for me, because I started as maintenance.
Well, don't spoil anything.
No, but for me, I started as maintenance. So for me, I have a lot of favorite maintenance products.
Yeah.
Where you guys are in the store, you're testing a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And
then-
yeah,
And then going back to like testing, I think the most important thing is like be consistent. Don't constantly change the way you test because your test results are going to be different every time.
Yep.
For example, a great example is if you're using the Hannah vials, some people fill it up to that line on the vial and some of us actually measure out 10 mils and we
Yep.
put 10 mils in. Don't go back and forth every time you
Yep.
test because
That's a great
your
call.
your
That
graph's
is.
going to be up and down and up and down and up and down.
That's a good point. So on your vial, where the line is, and when you put the liquid in, you see a curve on top.
Yep.
Okay, so on that curve, for it to be valid, the bottom of that curve has to be on the line.
Yep.
Man, I can't remember the scientific term for that curve,
You
but
know,
there
there
is
is.
a
I
scientific
learned it,
term
like,
for that
seventh grade,
curve,
and I can't
it is
remember.
supposed to be right at that bottom of that
It's
curve.
not on the sides; it's on the bottom
So
of that curve.
worst case scenario, get a 10 mil syringe if you don't want. If you don't know where the curve is or the bottom.
I think
is.
there's even ones that are like automated, so you can just click it and it pulls up exactly
Well, that
that 10
sounds really
mils and
scary.
just
I've seen guys use that before and it sounds nice, but
it
I
does.
haven't tried it. But
I
Yeah.
haven't either. That's on our to find list.
But going
That's
going
in our find something expensive and make Jen pay for it list.
there you go. Could save time. We'll see. But going to the consistency thing, it's like I would rather be off like 10 points on calcium know what my system's at consistently. So that way, again, it comes down to stability. That way my tank is stable.
Yeah, you see it. You see the trend.
Even if you're lower than what the recommended parameters are, your corals are still going to appreciate stability than constant fluctuation.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely,
I would agree with that. I don't think number chasing is the answer. I think stability chasing is the answer.
I agree. Except for temperature, you should always have your tank at 90. I'm just
I
kidding.
I've seen
That is a joke. That is not
New Wave
true.
Aquarius not responsible.
I've seen tanks with alkalinity of a little bit below 7. I'm talking like 6.8, but they're okay because it's always 6.8.
Do you guys know what the value for seawater is? Actual ocean?
6.5.
6.5.
Yep, 6.5.
But again, in aquariums, we always suggest stay away from the outliers. So that, let's talk about,
buffer.
actually, we should talk about where ideal parameters sit.
Ooh,
so
good call.
alkalinity, I would say 7.5 to 9-ish.
I think everybody has a different opinion on it. Do you guys? I would agree with Jen on this. I like mine lower. I'm a 7.
Mine has always been 7.5, 7.6.
Yep, to the 9. I mean, you can go from 8 to 12 or 7 to 12. I know that's, kind of the range. But
Recommended.
again, staying away from those outliers so you have a little bit of wiggle room, I think is really important. Plus, when you start getting into the higher or the lower, you have to take other elements into consideration as well.
I'm gonna get into trouble for this, but so a lot of people say, because I know that BRS had a video about corals grow faster and higher alkalinity.
Yep.
Okay, and I'm not saying they don't, but I don't see growth rate. I see
Density?
density. That's what I see. I don't know if it's what I mean. If you're trying to get an acro to actually grow, like
Yep.
branch out, I don't think you're gonna get it that way. You get thicker branches, but I don't think you're gonna
Potentially.
get
Potentially.
Yep.
But I don't think you're gonna get it that way.
Again, you go back to the seawater.
Yep.
I mean, there are some people say that you sing to your corals and they'll grow faster. So, again, staying away from, you can always trial and error. Some systems work a lot better. But again, when you have higher alkalinity levels, there are other factors that also have to increase with that. You can't keep, raise one without doing things to other levels. So that's kind of more of an advanced topic. So I'd say if you're looking for just baseline, that 7 to 9, calcium for like 350, 400 to 450,
420-ish.
420, yeah.
Yep.
Also, people are like, well, I keep it at 9 because I'm scared that if, in a drop,
It'll
it's
bottom
going
out.
to, it'll give me more time for me to react. And that's all true. But in my case, if I keep acros, if I'm at 9 and it drops, like you're saying, no matter what, I'm going to be toast.
Yep. no matter what, they're
That's
going to
true.
die.
Unless
they're
it's dropping slow,
Yeah.
but
Start our
otherwise, if
teaming.
it's a spike, I'm done.
Yep.
So
And
I
then
mean,
magnesium, that 1350 to 1400
Yep.
is right where you want to be.
Keep just enough to keep things from precipitating.
Yep.
Yep. And we also have a cheat sheet too. I don't know if it's linked on the site too.
Yep, we
It
have so on there we do have saltwater parameters or ocean parameters
Yep.
I should say on there, so you can directly compare that to what we recommend. We kind of tailored a few of the parameters on there to what we prefer at New Wave, so you can go on there. It's in the learning center section at the bottom. So
Awesome.
and we have calculators.
we do have
Yes, we do.
calculators too. Not for all the products yet. We're working on it, but we do have some for the Reef Endurance products. So if you
That's
guys want to
awesome.
learn
Which is
how
huge.
much
Yeah,
to
'cause I
dose, yeah.
think
Because that's a big, scary
He did
step
the,
for
the
it.
the QR code too, so you
Yep.
can just scan it.
Scan
right?
it, and it should
Take
pop
it
Or
right
it's
to it.
coming
It's
that way.
coming. We will have mixing jugs coming soon.
Yes.
So
So then you'll have
even cooler.
QR codes where you can
New
we'll take-
Wave.
Yeah, we'll take the guesswork out. I know that there's other calculators also available. So if you are confused, and if it does, I mean, depending on what it is, make sure you're matching the product with the calculator and not just this calculator says add
for this.
5,000 of milliliters of magnesium.
Yeah.
Well, think about that.
Red Sea product is a lot different than your bulk pharma product.
Big.
Yeah,
So-
agreed. So, I mean,
Bingo.
make sure the calculator, like I said, the calculators and whatnot that you're using are matching the products that you're using them with.
Yeah.
And some out there do have the selection. They allow you to select what are you using.
Yep.
So
I think
that's-
Aquaforce does that too, where
Yep.
they say that and then
Yep.
they give you the basics. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think for the purpose of this podcast, I mean, we touched on all the basics. We kind of gave that parameter, the ideal parameters, and then how to dose.
I mean,
What's
it's a
your
big
first
topic.
steps?
So I mean,
It's a huge topic.
I feel like we'll revisit and get more
Yeah.
into it a little bit.
Yep.
But I think this is a great beginning style of getting your feet wet with dosing.
yeah. So if you guys have like further questions, you want us to dive in deeper, specifically on certain things, just send us a question, and then that'll help us kind of formulate maybe the part 2 to this.
Where do
this
we send
episode.
that question to?
2, 3, 4, 5,
Email.
10.
Oh, well, I'm glad you asked, Ted. You can go to newwaveaquaria.com/podcast and submit your question there.
I feel like we should have a challenge how quickly you can say that.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah,
I need more coffee in me for that.
Oh, yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, a lot of caffeine.
And bottom line is also, if you check our website, just buy everything there.
Yeah.
No need to go anywhere else.
Right? And if we don't have it, just request it and we'll get it for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you want to rent Ted for a day, that's fine.
support your LFS.
Big time.
Also,
Support
if
your
you need
LFS.
raccoons, talk to Jen.
Oh, no.
Half raccoon, sir.
Yes. Or
Half.
or a puppy named Greg.
Yeah.
He's still available. And he's still available
and
along
the bio wheel. Or the
yeah,
bio
the
tower.
bio tower. So we're collecting things to give away. So hopefully
Next up, we'll have a calcium reactor. No, I'm just kidding.
No.
That is not for
No,
free.
no.
And a big tank.
So all right, well thank you guys so much for watching New Wave After Dark, and we hope to see you all soon.
What? Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Oh god.
Ah.
Bye.